Put your seatbelts on and get ready for the ride. We're the freaking New York Jets, so we're built for this shit.
Hello and welcome to another episode of In the Trenches with Gang Green. I'm your host, Bubbs. Today is Wednesday, July 23rd. Hopefully everybody's having a good day so far today. This is episode 576 of the In the Trenches with Gang Green podcast. I thank you, as always, for joining me. For those tuning in on YouTube, make sure to please like and subscribe. Of course, appreciate all of those tuning in on all the different audio podcast platforms. And today we have our second installment of our 2025 New York Jets player previews. If you missed it in our first installment on Monday, obviously you know the drill. Every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday throughout training camp, 2 players do a profile projection, one on offense, one on defense. Monday, we discussed AVT, Elijah Vera Tucker, and Michael Carter II. And today, on the offensive side of the football, we're going to take a look at year 2 running back Braelon Allen and new free agent, free safety Andre Cisco as well on the defensive side of the football here on today's podcast. So we'll start up here on offense with Braelon Allen entering year 2 at 21 years old. Of course, 6'1", 235 pounds, just a massive, massive specimen at the running back position. Of course, the 2024 4th-round pick, 134th overall out of Wisconsin. And Braelon Allen's a guy that enters the 2025 season here for the New York Jets as one of the prime breakout candidates when you look at this roster as a whole and specifically look at the offense. Braelon Allen is a guy that I've talked about a couple times on this podcast, and many other Jet fans as well share the same feeling of somebody that could benefit from this new offensive staff, benefit from the background of Tanner Engstrand, of course, coming from the Detroit Lions, who, of course, have one of the best 1-2 punches in the backfield of Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery, of course, the good old Sonic and Knuckles combination. And you look at that and you start to project a pretty positive outlook on the possibility of what Breece Hall and Braelon Allen can do together this year in 2025 in what is going to be a run-first offense as this team changes their identity, of course, here coming up this season. Braelon Allen's such an exciting player because he's still so young. And I know that's shouldn't come as much of a surprise. Yeah, obviously he's young. He's only entering year 2, but he's 21 years old. I mean, this was a guy in his rookie year. We joke about this, but it's the truth. He couldn't legally buy a drink his entire rookie year last year. He didn't turn 21 until later on in January when the season was already over. So he's still so young. He still has so much room to grow. And Braelon Allen's a player that I think in this offense can benefit a really big way, as I kind of just mentioned in the open, from this improved coaching staff and this improved mindset. And, of course, benefit from a run-first offense behind Breece Hall. If he's utilized properly, the 1-2 punch with Breece has a lot of potential. You know, Braelon Allen, you look at his season last year, it was kind of interesting when you break it up into, really, in my opinion, 2 pieces. Braelon Allen got off to a very strong start. He was similar to kind of as the Jets went early in the year, Braelon Allen went, right? They start 2-1. The first 4 weeks, specifically for Braelon Allen, were positive. You know, that Tennessee Titans game, he had 2 touchdowns, of course. He had the rushing touchdown. He also had that big receiving touchdown. You saw early on, first couple weeks, him being utilized in the offense, him being a really nice compliment to Breece Hall. And then all of a sudden, right as the Jets season and the offense as a whole just went into a complete tailspin, Braelon Allen's production completely dropped off. And a lot of it, in my opinion, was more so they just stopped using him and he wasn't being used properly. And when you really break down the splits, it really, I think, shows kind of what took place last year and gives you a better vision of what could take place here in 2025. So you look at his overall numbers last season for Braelon Allen: 92 carries, 334 yards, 3.6 yards per carry, and 2 touchdowns. Those were some of the rushing stats. You look at the receiving stats, because early on, of course, he played a role, and he is a guy that it can be utilized out of the backfield. He's an under-the-radar pass catcher, not something that many people talk about him as, but pass catching is a underrated ability that if he continues to develop it, can be a dangerous aspect and another tool for his game. 19 receptions last year on 27 targets, 148 yards, 7.8 yards per reception, and 1 touchdown. So as a whole, he played all 17 games, 111 total touches, 482 yards, 4.3 yards per touch, and 3 touchdowns. Overall, little underwhelming, nothing special, nothing crazy. Obviously, the 3.6 yards per carry were certainly, that's something that you obviously want to see take definitely a jump up here in 2025. But when you really break down the splits here and you break down the first 4 games and in really the next 13, it's pretty noticeable, the difference. Braelon Allen got off to the strong start. You look at the rushing numbers. In his first 4 games last year, 27 carries, 130 yards. He was averaging 4.8 yards per carry. He was almost averaging 5 yards a carry in those first 4 games. In fact, that Thursday night game against the New England Patriots, which, as we all end up finding out, was the peak of the season, he averaged 5 yards a carry that night. And he also added on another 3 catches. You look at the receiving numbers in those first 4 games: 7 receptions, 9 targets, 57 yards, 8.1 yards per reception, a touchdown. So in total, 30 total touches, 187 yards, 6.2 yards per attempt, and 1 touchdown in his first 4 games. Again, you compare those to the full season, just 3.6 yards per carry in the full season. Well, the first 4, he was upwards at 4.8, 7.8 yards, so he was under 8 per reception. He got over 8 in the first 4, and he was averaging only about 4.3 yards per touch in the entire year on 111 touches. His first 30, he was at 6.2, so he was averaging about 2 more yards per touch in the first 4 games than he did the whole year. And then I took the week 5 through week 17 stats, and they're even more alarming. After that, 65 carries, 204 yards, 3.1 yards per carry. So, of course, the yards per carry dropped down almost 2 yards less. Receiving-wise, 12 receptions, 91 yards, 7.5 yards per carry. In total, week 5 through 17, so those next 13 games, 77 touches, 295 yards, 3.8 yards per attempt, and 1 touchdown. He also just had, of course, that being that 1 rushing touchdown. And his production, too, from a volume standpoint, 29.3% of his carries came in the first 4 games. 36.8% of his receptions came in the first 4 games. And 27% of his total opportunities came in the first 4 games. Yards as well, 38.9% rushing, 33.3% receiving, all came in the first 4 games. And 38.8% of his total yards came in the first 4 games. So, or 38.5% of his receiving, rather, came in the first 4 games. So when you really break down the numbers, he got off to the strong start, and then as the season went south, the Jets really got away from running the football, right? It turned into the Aaron Rodgers, Devontae Adams, 40 passes a game show, trying to get my 500 touchdown. You had the coordinator change, of course, in the middle of the year from Hackett to Todd Downing. You had all those issues. The New York Jets turned out to be the 31st ranked rushing offense in football. It was a complete disaster. And that's where the Braelon Allen drop-off really started to happen, where he in some of these games just was not used at all. And it wasn't even, there's some situations where he was an obvious opportunity to be used, short yardage situations where he wasn't being used. And that's where you look at this season under Tanner Engstrom, and it just in a backfield as well with Fields, Brees, things can really open up. The read options, the RPOs, we've talked about it a ton. some of these design plays that they're going to run schematically, what the New York Jets are going to do this year on offense. Braelon Allen is a guy that can benefit from that. And I want to read one more thing, another thing too, that I think is very important in this. You talk about the short yardage stuff with Braelon Allen, and the short yardage this year for the Jets should be a lot better. The Jets have not been a good short yardage team the last couple years. No real numbers that I have to back that up. It's more so just the eye test. You watch the Jets in fourth and short, third and short situations, they don't do well. Braelon Allen does well in those situations. In fact, he was one of the better running backs in the NFL last year when he got the opportunity in the short yardage situations. In 2 yards or less last year, he had 16 carries. 14 of those 16 he converted for a first down. That's an 85 or 87.5% conversion rate. And on those carries, he had 3.3 yards per carry, which is 0.1 above the league average. So he was above league average on yards per carry in runs with 2 yards or less. And he had a rushing grade of 90, which was first among all running backs in the NFL last year in runs on plays 2 yards or less. So to put it simply, he was very good in those short yardage situations, and I don't think the Jets used him enough. And that's where he really complements Brees well. Now, another factor into the short yardage, you're going to see Fields used a lot in short yardage situations this year. But Braelon Allen adds another element on top of that, another piece of that puzzle that is successful in those short yardage situations, right? Brees is that do-it-all type of running back. Braelon Allen complements him very well as that boozer type of downhill, physical run through you. And he showed at times last season, he gets to the open field, he can hit another level, right? I don't think many people think of a Braelon Allen as the fastest, most speedy guy, but he does have an ability when he gets to the second level to reach another notch and pick up some speed and be able to kind of surprise the defense a little bit. I think surprise people a little bit with that when he gets into the open field. Overall, he graded out pretty well. 73.6 overall grade and 82 rushing grade. A lot of that had to do with the short yardage stuff. I think you look at Braelon, though, and I kind of look at David Montgomery, right? And you look at what he was able to do with Jahmyr Gibbs. David Montgomery is more of that similar build, a little bit smaller, but similar in terms of size, in terms of that bigger, that thicker type of boozer type of physical running back that complements your do-it-all guy. In Detroit's case, it's Gibbs, where Engstrand's coming from. In this case, it's Brees. And I think that's where you got to get excited for Braelon Allen this year. One of this team's, I think, breakout candidates. So, Braelon Allen, Brees Hall, lots of potential going into this year if everything goes as planned, especially with an offense that's going to be centered around running the football. And Braelon Allen, I think, a long list of players, but one of the guys that I think could, too, benefit the most from this regime change, coaching change, different mindset because of what took place last year. And you could tell when they got away from the run how much he was impacted. Give him consistent opportunities, he should be able to have success. So that's Braelon Allen. Want to move on now here to the second part of the show, second part of the player preview, and that is Andre Cisco here on the defensive side of the football. The free agent safety, year 5, he is entering. First 4 years of his career spent with the Jacksonville Jaguars, coming in here at 6 foot, 210 pounds, 25 years old. He was a 2021 third-round pick, 65th overall out of Syracuse. It was a 1-year deal, $8.5 million, $7.5 million guaranteed. Cisco was one of the more well-liked, cool story type of signings this offseason here for this New York Jets team. Grew up on Long Island, grew up a Jet fan, of course, went to Syracuse, so local guy, and now he gets an opportunity to play for his childhood team. And anytime you see a story like that in sports, it's always pretty cool. So wanted to mention that here out of the gate. And Andre Cisco is a really interesting player, and I was really looking forward to diving into him here today because you look at how his career has gone so far. The first 3 years of his career, really, really good. Really, really solid. Looked like he was on his way to being a long-term piece as a day 2 pick in Jacksonville. looked like entering last year, he was on his way to getting a second contract, playing a role there long-term, and turning himself into really one of the better young safeties on the rise, one of the more underrated safeties as a whole. Forget just young, but in the NFL, especially from a coverage standpoint, did a lot of really good things. Even more so, rookie year played more so in a developmental role, but when you 2022, 2023 was so good, and you went into last year from a Jaguars perspective, Cisco's perspective, expecting another one of those productive seasons and potentially on his way to earning a second contract with the team, being a long-term fit there, and that never happened. In fact, the complete opposite happened. And that's where the New York Jets are able to get him kind of on this buy low, low risk, high reward type of signing where it's a cheap 1-year deal. If it doesn't work out, you don't spend a ton, right? It's only $8.5 million, $7.5 million in guaranteed. You move on at the end of the year. And in the best case scenario, if it does work and he returns to 2022, 2023 form, well, you're getting him on a cheap contract, 1-year deal, and you're getting a guy that's a very productive player, can be a very productive player for this secondary, and potentially somebody that could slot in here long term. And he's another one of these signings that the New York Jets are banking on this coaching staff being able to, like a lot of spots on this team with a young roster, right? Cisco's still young, just 25 years old, only entering year number 5 here. This staff getting more out of him than what happened last year and getting him back to the 2022-2023 player that he was. And to be honest, I think a lot of Cisco's issues last year, and I'm not trying to make excuses for him, but I really do think when you dive in, and I actually spoke to a Jaguars reporter about this, Travis D. Holmes, who we actually had on when the Jets played the Jaguars this past season, does an awesome job covering Jacksonville. I actually spoke to him about Cisco, and he also kind of got the feeling that last year was more so a product of the environment in Jacksonville than it was Cisco himself. And I think that's got to give you some confidence if you're a Jet fan in a bounce back this year. You look at the numbers last season, it was ugly. 68 tackles, 1 interception, 7 passes defended. These numbers, really what I'm going to read you, though, this is where things get ugly. 11 missed tackles, a career worst. 61.2 overall grade, worst in his career. 60.1 coverage grade, worst in his career. I mentioned those 11 missed tackles. That added out to a 52.9 tackling grade, worst in his career. He had allowed 370 yards. That was the most. 19.5 yards per reception allowed, most in his career. 3 touchdowns allowed, most in his career. And he had allowed a 125.7 passer rating, which was the highest in his career. And out of 73 qualified safeties, that ranks 61st. So well towards the bottom there. And when you look at the Jaguars as a whole last year, and this is where a lot of people bring up the product of the system and what happened in Jacksonville, right? Of course, it was a disaster season, of course, leads to, a coaching change and a regime change and all that stuff. They all struggled as a coverage team. Jacksonville last year took a massive step back. It wasn't just Cisco. It was the entire defense that took a step back as a unit in coverage. And Ryan Nielsen, the defensive coordinator, I think it shows he was a one and done. Now, he was the defensive coordinator last year, one and done, is now out. Pass defense as a whole struggling. That's where I think Cisco is more of a product of the environment. And you also hear, too, defense Nielsen last year, Jacksonville actually had him put on a little bit of weight, and some feel that caused him to lose a little bit of speed, lose a little bit of that ability that he had, and that's where you saw some of those mistakes. That's where you saw what was a really, really down year. But moving on from what was a down year last year, and you look at the potential for Cisco, you look at the previous years in 2022 and 2023, and that's where you can get excited for this low-risk, high-reward type of signing. Even if he's not this player, if he's close to this, it's still a nice piece to have in this secondary and still an upgrade at safety over what the Jets really have been dealing with, which is kind of a lot of different pieces moving in and out in the safety room. So from 2022 to 2023, he had 7 interceptions. During that time, he's a ball hawk, very good in coverage, good at tackling, does a nice job against the run, but his strength, his bread and butter, his MO is his ability in coverage. And it's not just, you go watch him and you watch some of the tape and you watch the interceptions. They're not just the kind of you luck into them or easy ones. It is a legitimate coming up in coverage, jumping routes, all that stuff where he's earning those interceptions, if you will. Because sometimes interceptions, right, it can kind of be an interesting stat where it only tells you so much until you actually watch it. But 7 picks from 2022 to 2023 ranked tied for 4th among safeties. And I think this is really important as well. His touchdown to interception ratio was one of the best in the NFL during those 2 years. In 2022, he had a 2-to-3 touchdown to interception ratio. So more interceptions than touchdowns allowed. And then in 2023, it got even better where he had a 2-to-4 ratio. In total in those 2 years, he allowed 4 touchdowns and had 7 interceptions. The only safeties in the NFL during that time with 7 or more interceptions and 3 or fewer touchdowns allowed in each of those seasons were Jesse Bates, C.J. Gardner-Johnson, Kirby Joseph, and Geno Stone. So he was top 5 in that category. Throw you some other numbers here just to show where he was from a coverage perspective prior to last year's struggles and where he can hopefully get back to. 2022, he had an 87.7 passer rating allowed. That was 30th among 75 qualified safeties. And he had a 68 coverage grade, which was 34th among 75 qualified safeties. Fast forward a year later, 2023, even better. 83.9 passer rating allowed was 29th, so top 30 there. And then a 71.5 coverage grade was 20th among all qualified safeties. And that 71.5 coverage grade was actually a career high. And he also put together an overall career high from a PFF grade standpoint. 68.9 overall was also a career high. And his best run defense grade came in 2021. Again, 74.7. But again, good tackler, good against the run. But this is a guy that when he's at his best, very good in coverage. And plays deep safety, 71% of his snaps are at deep safety in his career. 70% he played last year. So I look at Cisco this season, right, coming off a really difficult season. Actually got benched towards the end of the year and ended up being a healthy scratch in the last game in Week 18. I look at him more so what just took place in Jacksonville. Defense as a whole regressed. Coaching was a disaster. Team was a disaster. Defensive coordinator, of course, is not back, clearly. He was a one and done. It was a lot of things went wrong. I don't think you can just pin it on Cisco. I'm not going to sit here and say he is 100% going to be back to 2022, 2023 form, but he should be close to it, right? And I think there is a reality where he is. He's only 25 years old. He had one down year. You get him into this system with a coaching staff that can hopefully elevate talent and just be better than what he was dealing with in Jacksonville last year, which shouldn't take much. I think you look at a 25-year-old and a cheap signing, you like that deal, you like the upside, and you should like the potential here and like the outlook, in my opinion, on Andre Cisco. The big question to me in the safety room, and we'll get to this in future player previews, is who slots in next to him at strong safety. I think there is a potential question mark there, but Cisco slots in easily there, free safety. And I think can very easily have a bounce back season for this New York Jets team. And I think having a safety and coverage that can do what Cisco is able to do during that 2022 and 2023 run that he was on, where he was playing his best football of his 4-year career so far, I think is really, really beneficial to the Jets. The Jets safeties obviously have had issues tackling, run defense. They've had issues in a couple different areas, but coverage as well hasn't always been their best. Cisco, of course, brings that coverage ability. So look for that bounce back this year with Andre Cisco here with the New York Jets. His hometown team, obviously a pretty cool story there. So that'll do it. Another player preview in the books. Appreciate your support as always. Let me know what you think in the comment section down below. What are your expectations for Braelon Allen entering the 2025 season and your expectations for Cisco entering the 2025 season? Appreciate your support as always. Stay tuned. A lot more content coming your way. Next player preview, of course, will be up on Friday, so stay tuned for that and a ton of other content coming out between now and then. Appreciate you all so much. Until next time, JETS, 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 Jets.